Meet Dragon Man. He's the newest representative on our human tree that we have. He was recently found in China. In fact, his archaeological name reflects his place that he was found. He is known as also Homo Longi. It's believed to be an advanced or as advanced as Neanderthal, and there are quite a few people that are believing that what we're looking at here is the Denisovan. Because we had so few representatives of it, it almost seems to fit it. If they can get a correct genetic signature out of it, like they did the finger bone out of the Denisovan, and see if it matches off, they might be quite surprised. Here's another depiction of it, just skull here. So it has extended brow ridges that you see there, and you can see there's still a little bit of a nasal slit left in it. He would have looked a little bit buck-toothed, and he doesn't have a high forehead at all. His brain is pushed back. In fact, he has the longest brain that's known so far out of a Homo species, so his brain is quite large. But instead of having the cranial loft that you see in modern humans, he actually still has an elongated type head. But it doesn't look elongated if you see it from the side. It's just a hair longer than normal people's. It doesn't look bulbous out or anything odd like that. Let's get into this and look at the wiki article that they have on it. Wiki's actually made an article on this and the other recent find that we've had inside of Israel area. And a lot of these researchers, instantly seeing the information that tried to be presented from the Chinese people, are saying, well, this seems like we're talking about the same creature here. The same person. Now, Dragon Man, Homo Longi, or it could be what they believe in Israel is the same thing as Homo Nasher. It's an extinct species of archaic human identified from nearly complete skull in Harbin on the northeast China plain, dating to a minimum of 146,000 years during the Middle Pleistocene. The skull was discovered in 1933 along under construction bridge at Manchukuo National Railway and finally brought to archaeologists in 2018. She decided to hold on to it for that many years. These archaeologists may force a revision by looking at this thing because it's closely related to H. longi, and it seems to be considered to be related to modern humans more closely than the European Neanderthal forms, which may force a revision of the current scientific consensus. Now, of course, we've found Neanderthal DNA in both the Chinese populations and, in fact, every single human outside of sub-Saharan Africans, basically. And they do have a touch of it to themselves, but it looks like they received it from somebody already that had a small amount of admixture, leaving a touch to them, but that's another video entirely. But looking at this, and we looked at Denisovans before and what they were talking about them and how large they were, this easily could represent them. H. longi is broadly anatomically similar to other Middle Pleistocene Chinese specimens and potentially represents the enigmatic Denisovans, though this is unconfirmed at this point. I can't speak today. Like other archaic humans, the skull is low and long, though, with massively inflated brow ridges, all puffed up, wide eye sockets, and a large mouth. The skull is the largest ever found in human species. Like modern humans, the face is rather flat, so it doesn't show prognathism so much, but the nose was rather large. The brain volume was about 114-20 cc's, which is within the range of modern humans and Neanderthals. The Harbin individual inhabited a cold, steppe-land environment alongside woolly mammoths, giant deer, Psalki's horse, elk, buffalo, and brown bears. So He comes from the middle province rather than the city Harbin from which the specimen was discovered. And so they tell you that the literal name of the lake or the river running through there was Black Dragon River, hence the nickname Dragon Man that they give it to it. Of course, being in China, that seems to fit somewhat. But this was an Asian type man, and it looks like he would have been in the mix now of a lot of people, and he may be one of these unknown hominids. We've done quite a few videos recently talking about how there were these unknown hominids in all of the world, basically, and pushes to the edge of the world, that a lot of which lived on a lot longer and into modern times. In fact, we're seeing a lot of hybridization, and that hybridization and re-hybridization ended up bringing about modern forms of humans that we see today. So, the Japanese-aligned Manchukuo Railway found this, recognized its importance likely as a result of public interest in the anthropology recently generated by Peking Man in 1929. Peking Man is also like a Homo erectus form that was still living on in the Chinese area, like one of the ones we were talking about, but one that live on that you can show into a much more recent time is known as Red Deer Caveman. So, before his death, the third generation of his family learned of the skull and reclaimed it back in 2018. So that's how they finally got it to the authorities, or it may not have ever been found. Chinese paleoanthropologist Quang Ji persuaded the family to donate it to the Hebei Geo University for study, where it's been stored. Its catalog number is, Owing to the skull's tumultuous history, its exact provenance and thus strategic context and age has been difficult to determine. In 2021, just recently, a few weeks ago, Chinese geologist Quanfeng Xiao and colleagues performed a non-destructive X-ray fluorescence, rare earth element, and strontium isotope analysis, correlating all three on the skull and various other mammalian fossils unearthed around that Jiaojing Bridge at the same time, and determined respectively that all the various fossils from the vicinity probably all were deposited around the same time, lived in the same region, and originate 12 meters or about 40 foot below the surface of Jiaojing, correlating to 98 foot within the upper Hangshang Formation, constrained to 309 back to 138,000 years ago. Direct uranium thorium dating of various points on the skull yielded a wild range of dates from 62 all the way to 296,000 years ago. Results of uranium leaching probably was the problem with that. They statistically determined the most likely minimum age is 146,000 years old, but a more accurate or exact date is needed to determine and give the exact provenance, and so it's still left undefinable. Nonetheless, the skull is well constrained to the Middle Pleistocene. It is contemporaneous with other Chinese specimens from Jiahe, Jujiaishan, Dali, and Hulong Cave. And the Dali is one specimen that they actually tried to get its own name at one time with too. It's the remains of a late Homo erectus or archaic Homo sapien who lived in mid-Pleistocene epoch. The remains comprise a complete fossilized skull which is discovered in Dali County, and they tried to rename it H. daliensis at the time. So they talk about this classification here, and in fact, let's see, Harbinger skull is quite similar to the Dali skull, and when the Dali skull was discovered in 1978, it was given a new name, H. sapiens daliensis, by its discoverer Xingwu, who shortly abandoned it. Consequently, should the Middle Pleistocene Asian humans represent a single unique species, the nomen H. daliensis would take priority. Although they recommend resurrecting this skeleton of daliensis, they argued that H. longi is sufficiently distinct in itself and allocated only that Dali and Hulong remains of daliensis. Thus, they claim at least 2 human species inhabited the late Pleistocene area in ancient China. So, instead, based on the conspicuously massive size of the molars, they suggested also that H. longi is most closely related and allied to the possibly same species as the Zache mandible from Tibet, which has been grouped with the enigmatic Denisovans. People have talked about a long time about how the Sherpas and stuff there, the people that are there, must have gotten something from the Denisovans that gave them the high altitude abilities and so on that aren't shown in other humans. It's a genetic thing. They believe it comes with Denisovans, which is an archaic human lineage apparently dispersed across East Asia during the Middle and Late Pleistocene, currently identifiable from only a genetic signature. They further contend that Middle Pleistocene Asian specimens are most closely related to modern humans, or H. sapiens, than the European Neanderthals. Though nuclear DNA and ancient protein analysis place the Zache mandible and Denisovans more closely to Neanderthals than modern humans. So there's a claim made on the way it looks somewhat, and saying, well, it looks a little more modern than it does to Neanderthal and so on else, but then they're saying, well, the nuclear DNA that they found in it and the ancient protein analysis place that and the Zache mandible and Denisovans more closely to Neanderthals than it would to modern humans. Having said that, we've looked at a lot of Neanderthals lately and the revisions of them, and they're not really so hairy anymore and start looking like Shakira and people that we well recognize. I did a video not too long ago where it was just a cluster of those, and it's funny, you could almost see people that you know and stars and things like that nowadays. In fact, when we looked at a Cro-Magnon version recently, it looked a lot like Robin Williams from Jumanji. And just like Robin Williams in Jumanji, if you shaved him up a lot, hey, except for that guy did have that cyst-type knot on his forehead. We're not going to talk about cysts, though, again, are we? So, he's got this low skull that's compared to it, and you can see it in this picture to the left here. Let me just pop it up here. And so he doesn't have this vaulting here at all. It's just sloping back. But it's quite long, front to back. So that's how it gets its size. So it's a little bit different. And they tell you that making it the longest human skull to date, for comparison, the dimensions of modern skulls are just 6.9 to 5.7 inches. So it's just an inch and a half or so longer from the average of us. But of course, it's lost a lot of vaulting from the above. So it also has the longest suborbital torus at 145.7 millimeters, which is different also, and things that they can show out of it. So they say that he doesn't have a post-orbital constriction behind his eyes, in the area behind his eyes before the brain that's connecting the two of them, and that's something that you still see in Neanderthals, and it is missing. And that's the reason that they say that along with no sagittal keel on the top of the forehead, but there is a little bit of a cresting and so on, they say, well, maybe more modern. Of course, you've got to compare it with all the rest of them and things, so it gets pretty deep. Despite the face being so wide, it's rather flat, or it has reduced mid-facial prognathism and recalls the condition exhibited in modern humans, the far more ancient ancestor and Middle Pleistocene Chinese specimens. Nonetheless, the tooth sockets for the incisors were angled outward, which is alveolar prognism, or really buck-toothed, if you will. The H. longi skull's mosaic morphology of the archaic derived traits and converges with some of the earliest specimens assigned to H. sapiens from Africa, notably Jebel Irhoud and Ili Springs. Because the original describers judged the Harbin skull to be closely allied with the Zache mandible, they believed H. longi lacked a chin, And so here we are again discussing this chin. So that's one real drastic trait that's going to have to be in modern humans. We all have a chin. The first person with a chin was like Cro-Magnon type Homo sapiens sapiens. And if supposedly if anybody has a chin, they must have had some type of interaction with the people or the one that gave the chin to them in the first place. So the specimen's lower jaw was not recovered, though, on the Harbin skull, so they can't make those determinations. So if they could have that, they could really make a determination. Of course, there's variations on a theme, and I'm starting to have seen far too many damn skulls, if you know what I mean. It gets to the point where, okay, but if you set them down on tables next to each other and so on, you start to get a real good idea of it and how things are progressing. And it doesn't progress in any streamlined in any way. There are very modern humans running around with very archaic species still left on this planet. So they say that the local was found with giant deer, Prelskowski's horse, elk, buffalo, which is bulbous, winesock, and the brown bear are all in the same area around with it. But Haaretz, Israel archaeologists, think the new Chinese hominin known as Dragon Man may be Homo Nasher. So this is entirely possible. This is a variation on the theme of the exact same person we just looked at on the other video. I'll try to put them back to back. So they're trying to give us a recent family tree like this. And if you look at it here, they're saying that Harbin would have been down in Zahe, perhaps similar. Dale run down from that. Hulong, Jinshan, Homo antecessor, and then from that, modern humans. But on that, they're showing an offshoot of Neanderthals, which doesn't even fit into play. Isn't that odd? Here we're seeing the range of Neanderthalensis, and the real concentrated range is in the blue. There's a portion showing in the brown and green that you see far off, and then also in the purple there next to the fly that's walking over there and right above my pointer, or is also a form of it. So it looks like maybe he went a long way distance, or maybe what we're actually looking at is someone who came in and mixed with this and then went this way, although in here in a mixing with somebody that was down here, and you end up with this and so on, because we're finding that a lot of this is really hybrids. Anyhow, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy, and we'll get on to more interesting topics, and we'll see what comes of this, for there are going to be papers that come out on this, and it'll show you the ancient connections. Here's another good way to end it, I guess, is this area here where he was found here. The other two specimens involved in what we're talking about, one was found here and one was found up here, close to that river basin where you see the Terran Basin mummies that are associated with all these pyramids and stuff that are in there, but that's for another video. But basically, this area right here off of that river, which is the Black Dragon River, is where we find Dragon Man, the newest found neighbor in the human family. Peace.